committee's latest rankings are out, and their treatment of BYU and Miami continues to be insane.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth, right here. This show is a part of the number one sports podcast network, Texas A&M and Utah. Thoughts there? Eric Morris to Oklahoma State. Looks like that is happening. And Mike Norvell not leaving Florida State. That on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So BYU and Miami are just week in and week out by the committee, getting the respect that they're not even close to getting the respect they deserve. They're getting the disrespect that they don't deserve. That's a double negative. You're supposed to stay away from that in sentence structure, but there's no other way to describe what is happening here. So here's the objection that I have primarily with the fact that if the playoff ended today, BYU wouldn't be in. Miami would not be in, but Notre Dame would be in and Alabama would be in. If that feels like brand bias to you, I don't really know how to push back on that particular argument, particularly when it comes to Notre Dame, because BYU has a win over the number 13 team in the country. Their only loss is to the number 5 team in the country by the playoff committee's own rankings. And yeah, they lost in pretty dominant fashion. Texas Tech was much better than BYU. And yet, the Cougars do not have a loss on their resume because there's just the one loss to the number 5 team in the country on the road. They do not have anything that comes close to the disaster that is Alabama's loss to Florida State. So I saw Kirk Herbstreit talking about Notre Dame recently on a show, and he was talking about how at a certain point, the head-to-head doesn't matter. Well, it matters, but it doesn't matter because you had these other bad outcomes. I'm not actually against that in principle because there is a point. Vanderbilt, in my rankings and in the committee's rankings, and I'll throw mine up here on the YouTube graphic for all of you, Vanderbilt's ahead of Texas. Texas beat Vanderbilt. They were significantly better. But what happened that allows me to put Texas comfortably behind Vanderbilt by 3 spots? Texas lost to Florida, and that's a horrifically bad loss. And so on the one hand, further down in the rankings there, the committee is punishing Texas for that. They should. But Alabama is just getting a free pass. And yes, Alabama has one of the best wins in college football this year going to Athens. They also have the worst loss of any team that if the season ended today would be in the playoff field as an at-large team, by far. By far. And so the inconsistency is what I object to. And I have for a long time said on this show, all offseason I said, hey, I'm more pro-committee than most. If they botch this, if Miami beats Pitt, and doesn't make the playoff at 10-2 for a second straight year, I didn't object to it as much last year, but Notre Dame does, I'm going to raise hell on this very podcast. There is going to be a sizable and impassioned rant from me into this microphone on this feed, wherever you're listening or watching. I appreciate you doing that, by the way. So then you look at BYU and go, wait a minute, does BYU have to win the Big 12 in order to get it in the playoff? It's looking that way because what you hear around Alabama is, well, if they make the playoff or if they make the SEC championship game and lose, they've got to make the playoff. You can't punish a team for getting there. That's something I wholeheartedly agree with. It should be a reward to make the conference championship game. It shouldn't be a punishment for losing it other than affecting your seeding, but it shouldn't affect whether you get in or out unless you were needing the automatic berth, like Clemson last year. Was 9-3, they weren't getting in the playoff. They win 10-3, and they're in. But SMU at 11-1 falls to 11-2. They still get into the playoff. It's trending towards that not being the case for BYU, which is insane. It's completely insane. Texas 1 year ago was an 11-win team. They did not play a gauntlet of an SEC schedule compared to some of the other schools in that conference. They lost to the same team twice. They lost to Georgia at home. They lost to Georgia in the SEC championship game. They got into the playoff. Nobody had a problem with it, including myself, because I have been incredibly consistent that if I were voting as a member of the College Football Playoff Committee, or if I were just a benevolent dictator in that space, if you only lose one time in a Power Four conference, I'm putting you in the playoff, because my priority is just different of the College Football Playoff Committee. That's what this kind of comes down to. Really, it's what it comes down to. They like eye test, and I'm sure whether they'd ever admit it or not, there's a consideration of what's going to be good on television. And you know what else? Because of SMU, I think this is in part, if it goes in this direction, I hope it works itself out. I'm not sure that it will. If the committee leaves BYU out at 11-2, I think it's because of what SMU did last season, what Indiana did last year, and the narrative that came out of that. I think the committee would be seriously concerned. By the way, Tennessee got in at 10-2 and got absolutely shellacked, and nobody seems to remember that. It's just all Indiana SMU. Well, they got in with the record, but their schedule wasn't good enough, and they didn't do this, that, and the other thing. If BYU goes 11-2 and misses the playoff, it'd be a disgrace to the College Football Playoff Committee. And you know what else? You know, I heard this suggested. You'll hear this on the Locked On Big Ten Squad on Thursday. Do you think it's at all possible? This is about as conspiratorial as I will ever get on this show. Do you think that the desire to leave BYU out at a hypothetical 11-2, which is very likely, very possible, I will say, not likely, but more likely than not, incredibly possible, but not the only outcome. Do you think they'll use it as a rationalization to expand the playoff? If you miss the piece of news that normally in the off season would lead my show for probably 3 days in a row, they have pushed back the date until January to decide on a new playoff format for next year. What does that allow them to do? Make another 12-team playoff, deal with the fallout, get all of the reactions, and then decide what they're going to do next year. And what do you want to bet? That there is going to be a team or two, be it Miami, be it BYU, or someone else that's incredibly deserving in the eyes of the committee, or that's how they'll pitch it to you. Well, if you want this team, you just have to expand the playoff. No, you don't. You just have to run the playoff committee better than you're currently planning to. Maybe Oklahoma loses to LSU somehow, and this gets easier. Maybe Notre Dame's not losing this week. Maybe Alabama loses to Auburn, and this gets easier. But unfortunately, what we're seeing play out, Alabama plays Auburn, BYU plays UCF. They're a giant favorite. They are at home. You think that's going to move the needle for the committee, that they'll have them leapfrog Bama if they go on the road and win at Auburn? Of course they won't. And I pointed this out a while back, not that long ago on the show. All these shows blend together at this point in the year. Alabama, or BYU, has an Alabama problem. And BYU's Alabama problem is staring you in the face. If you are in Provo, you are going to go to Lavelle Edwards Stadium this weekend. You're going to root really hard for the Cougars, and you're going to be watching on your phones, hoping, praying, and just doing whatever you can from afar to will Auburn to a victory over Alabama, because I don't think you want to get into a resume battle there. If the only game you win the rest of the year is against UCF, do you think that's putting you in over Alabama? I don't think so. And I think that stinks because I want the results on the field in the regular season to have the utmost value. That is not the way the committee thinks, unfortunately. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments below. Hit me up on Twitter at @LockedOn_CFB. We can talk about all this sort of stuff over there. I'm really happy a game's happening this week, but it kind of stinks. First, this episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And if you want to fade my best bets, I can't follow you. I'm going to have several to try to go absolutely gangbusters this week in rivalry week, and I'm 2-10 in my last 12. That's not good. Not good. If you want to fade the picks, who am I to stop you? I'm here, but I'm just sitting here advising you to do it. Seems like a good strategy. Right now, FanDuel's giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. I am ecstatic about rivalry week, and the separation between NFL rivalries and college rivalries is something I've highlighted a lot because college just does it better. It's more tribal, it's more passionate, it's just better across the board. There's more pageantry, history, tradition. There's only one a year, not two like in the NFL. It's just across the board. So my everydayers who have been with me for a while, thank you for doing that, by the way. And thank you all for helping make Locked On the #1 sports podcast network out there. What I have long said is realignment is not great for the sport. The super conferences, they blow things up. You have imbalanced conference schedules in terms of quality of teams you're playing. There are all sorts of issues, right? One of my favorite things for quite a while that realignment has brought back is Texas playing Texas A&M. This is as good of a rivalry between the two fan bases as exists in the entire sport. And that it went dormant for as long as it did is a travesty. It never needed to happen, but Texas A&M left and then Texas got there as well. But again, this is one that needed to just continue to be played. Like the border war, Kansas and Missouri. That one never should have stopped. It was played this year. It was a fantastic game. So I think that for Texas A&M and Texas to be playing in rivalry week on an annual basis, 10 out of 10, 5 stars, no notes. Texas A&M is favored by just 2.5 points against the Longhorns in this game. I am so excited to watch because there is going to be something very classic and traditional about this matchup from a feel standpoint. For me, someone that doesn't have a dog in the fight. I don't really care if Texas A&M or Texas wins. I'm going to make a pick. It's Texas A&M to win the game. But I don't have a super strong feeling. I don't have a personal tie to it or anything like that. So what I look at in this game and why I say it has a traditional feel is college football used to just be about the game in front of you, the regular season matchups, and the postseason was secondary, and we liked bowl season and thought playing in the Fiesta Bowl with nothing else beyond it was a great outcome and such. And of course, the world has changed, and so my commentaries evolved from that particular time, in addition to the fact that I didn't necessarily have commentary back then because I was, 10. So Texas A&M and Texas has, I want to make this very clear, I repeat, 0 major playoff implications. That's the downside. Texas A&M is 11-0. Yeah, the SEC applies to what I talked about or gets the standard applied to it that I apply to any Power 4 conference. You win 11 regular season games, you lose one time, I want you in the playoff. I want you in the playoff. If I had a vote, I would split it probably into 2 5-point scales to create a number out of 10. Best and most deserving. If you go 11-1, you're a 4.5 out of 5 on most deserving. I might not think you're the best. I might only give you a 3. But if you're at 7.5, pretty good score. 7.5 out of 10, be a pretty good score. So Texas A&M is a team that deserves to go to the college football playoff, whether or not they lose this game, whether or not they win the SEC. Sure, it'll affect seeding. Okay, for whatever that is worth. The Aggies could wind up with a home football game as a playoff matchup if they lose this game. So for Texas A&M getting into the playoff, there is I repeat, no major implication unless you care about getting a bye. Okay. The bye teams went 0-4 last year. I don't think that's likely to continue. One of them's going to win this year, probably 2. Now, on the other side for Texas, I also want this to be very clear. There are no playoff implications for the Longhorns. The pileup of teams, and I'm about to get to what could happen here because it just continues to look more and more because of the matchups you've got this week. Like so many 10-win teams will get left out, and I actually kind of like that. I kind of like it. I feel for those fan bases, but I kind of like it. Anyway, Texas at 9-3, even if they have a win over Texas A&M, should under no circumstance be considered, discussed, thought about, talked about, notes jotted down, calculations being, I want to see nothing, and you will hear nothing on this program with regards to Texas being a potential playoff team. I don't want to see a 3-loss team make the playoff. It's why I don't want the playoff expanded ever again. You already went too far with 12. 6 or 8 was the right number. You went to 12. Okay, whatever. Can we please knock this off? Probably not. But Texas at 9-3 should be looking back and feeling what Alabama felt last year, what Ole Miss felt last year, what South Carolina felt last year. For Ole Miss, it was Kentucky. For Alabama, it was Oklahoma. For South Carolina, it was one of a couple close games that didn't go their way. Texas should feel at the end of this year, oh my goodness, I'm going to impersonate a Texas fan for a moment and what I want them to think and feel at the end of this year. If they beat Texas A&M. That's an if. I don't think that's happening, by the way. I like Texas A&M to win 34-27. But if the Longhorns win, that's not impossible. I want Longhorns to feel like this. Oh my goodness, we actually lost to Florida. That's why we didn't make the playoff, and Florida fired their coach. That's what it should be. That's what it should be. Now, real quick, Utah is playing at Kansas this week. That's a tougher game than you'd think. The Wildcats, the other team in Kansas, went for about 592,000 yards running on Utah, and Kansas could do the same. If Utah finds a way to win, they're 11.5-point favorite on the road. They'll be sitting there at 10-2. And though I love Utah fans, I reside in the Beehive State. That's not where this show is being recorded, but I reside in the Beehive State. I know a lot of Utah fans. They are great. It's an awesome fan base. I am okay with teams getting left out at 10-2. It's going to happen again. And you know why I'm okay with it? Go back to my original principle about what makes college football great, the regular season and the week-to-week urgency. If 10-2 doesn't lock you into the playoff, even with a resume like Utah's, where they have steamrolled everybody except for Kansas State, and their 2 losses, they've routed everybody else. If that's not enough, then we are still in a good place as a sport. Not where I'd like us to be, but we're still in a good place. Because that means after losing to BYU, it's got to sting for Utah fans. And it's going to sting even more because it'll be the game to look back and go, wow, if Utah had won that game, they would have been in the playoff. And I think they would have, but maybe they'd be in the exact spot where BYU is right now. They probably would. They're separated by 1 game. It's that matchup. But you could see 10-2 Miami get left out. You could see 10-2 Utah get left out. 10-2 Vanderbilt get left out. 10-2 Virginia likely to get left out. Georgia Tech fell all the way to 23. They cratered after last week's loss to Pitt at home. They could beat Georgia this week. They're an 11.5-point home underdog. They could beat Georgia. They still probably wouldn't get in the playoff at 10-2, which I think is a shame. But that's the price you pay being in the ACC right now. So, Utah, I love you, but if you don't get in at 10-2, I'm probably not even going to have you there. If you look at my rankings here, for those watching on YouTube, I've got Utah at 15. If they win, they need Vandy to lose. They need Michigan to lose. Well, that could happen, but then you need Notre Dame to lose, and you need Miami to lose, because you're going to have the G5 and the ACC champ. I don't see it. It's not a 0% chance, Utah, but it's pretty low. 10-2 not getting you into the playoff. By the way, just throwing this out there. There is absolutely a world in which after Saturday, if Miami goes on the road and beats Pitt, who's a ranked team, I might jump them over Alabama. Might do it. I'm just saying I might. Just saying I might, which would leave Bama out of the playoff at 10-2. In which case they'd look back and go, oh my goodness, the Florida State game. And that's all I want. That's all I really want in life. So, that and the BCS. I'm kidding. Sort of. Eric Morris. Let's go to the coaching carousel because we have names to discuss. First, this episode brought to you by Game Time. College football is back, and it's been back for quite a long time. And if you want to go to a rivalry game this week, like the Egg Bowl, the Iron Bowl, the Game, the Border War, whatever you're looking for, Game Time's the way to do it, because they don't deal with endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. You don't have to deal with those things at Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. The easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. That is a wonderful concept. Not every place has that. And I tell you, I've used Game Time to go to a bunch of events over the last couple of years. I've saved money every time compared to other ticketing services, and the all-in pricing feature, I can't get enough of it. I really can't. I get really annoyed when others just tag on fees or taxes or whatever at the end. Game Time isn't about that. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. A trio of head coaches have made moves in different ways. You've got Eric Morris reportedly going to be the next head coach at Oklahoma State. You have got Jim Mora Jr. migrating back towards the West and maybe trending in a few years towards a Power 4 job if he succeeds at Colorado State. He was at UConn, where he did very well at a non-traditional football school. And then you've got Florida State retaining Mike Norvell. So I've said all I wanted to say about Jim Mora. It's just an interesting name. It's something to throw out there. He was a UCLA head coach for a while, and then they moved on from him, and it hasn't gone incredible since he left. Chip Kelly had a brief run of success, but it didn't maximize its full potential there. Just keep an eye on that one. But Eric Morris going to Oklahoma State is what the report is. I don't think it's been officially announced or confirmed as I'm recording this show, but that's the indication. This feels like a really good fit. Eric Morris's offenses, and we'll see what happens with his quarterback, Drew Mestamaker, because, man, they got a tailback there at North Texas who's really good. If those guys wind up hitting the portal, then guess what? That could be a good foundational starting point for Oklahoma State in 2026. Eric Morris has been an offensive coordinator that has coached the likes of Patrick Mahomes, John Mateer, Cam Ward, amongst others. He has been a head coach at Incarnate Word. That's an FCS school in the Southland Conference. A head coach at North Texas. After he was the OC at Washington State, he became the head coach at North Texas. He has turned them around. He has them legitimately within striking distance of the college football playoff. Going to be the head coach at Oklahoma State? I'm not aware, as I record this show, whether he plans to stay with the team through the entire run. But this is a great time to bring up, again, as I talked about with Lane Kiffin earlier this week on this very show. The college football calendar is so ridiculously dumb. It was constructed by people operating within a framework that takes far too heavily into account the academic calendar. I'm sorry if admins or professors anywhere don't like that athletes would get special treatment for their classes, but this is the way that the world needs to work. College football is too big, too powerful, and too important to say we're going to structure our sport around the academic calendar. I'm sorry. Even though I'm someone that continuously, when there's been a push, anytime it's popped up to say, well, they should just become employees full time and we should just forget the degree. Nope. No. Bad idea. Very bad idea. I am against that wholeheartedly. You open a big can of worms and it's not a good one, as if there's any can of worms that's good that's not gummy worms. So I'm not advocating for that particular solution. I am pointing out that relative to the number of schools we're talking about and how many kids enter a school, administratively, it just shouldn't be that hard. It's the old Moneyball line. It's not that hard, Scott. Tell them, Wash. It's incredibly hard. Hey, anything worth doing is. We're going to teach you. This is worth doing to fix the calendar so that this decision, this discussion, this timeline doesn't have to happen. Lane Kiffin could be announced within the next week as LSU's next head coach, as he's in the midst of Ole Miss having probably the best season in the history of the program. North Texas making the college football playoff is a landmark moment for that university. That opportunity is within their own grasp. They just have to win this week, get to the American Championship game, and then beat, in all likelihood, Tulane. If they do that, they're probably in. And instead, what do the fans have to think about? Oh, this isn't going to last, and he could leave before that happened, and you could just throw away the season. If your anger is being directed at coaches, it is fair and right for fans to be upset when a coach leaves them. I feel like it's different when you go from Group of 5 to the Power 4 because the difference in money is just so severe. And so I wonder if that makes it sting a little bit less for Group of 5 fans. Let me know in the comments. I'm not saying it feels great. I'm just saying it's different when, Lincoln Riley leaves Oklahoma for USC. That can't land the same with a fan base as going from North Texas to Oklahoma State to try to win a Big 12 championship. So for North Texas to be having this year and their head coach being worthy of that sort of opportunity, accepting it, and then having to make this decision and have it disrupt everything, you can be upset with the coach for leaving. You cannot be upset at the timing of all this. Why couldn't he wait till the end of the year? Because the buffoons who have constructed the college football calendar have taken signing day, which used to be in February, where it belongs, and they put it at the end of December while the season is still going on. It makes no sense. And then we had this early portal window in December, which was completely illogical, and at least someone had the wherewithal to go, well, let's get rid of that. Oh, okay, good. So you're going to put it after the season? No, I'm going to keep it while the postseason is still alive, but I'm going to wait for bowl season to end. That way kids are transferring at the start of the semester. Oh my goodness, who cares? Who cares? I cannot believe that that is a reason that gets cited for making decisions about a multi-billion-dollar sports industry. It's unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. And you know why it's so ridiculous and why you shouldn't be as mad at Lane Kiffin or Eric Morris as you probably are if you've got that sentiment? When a coach leaves, as Chip Kelly did once upon a time from UCLA in February, after the portal, after signing day, he left super late to go be the OC at Ohio State. He could be a college OC again very soon. It didn't work out well with the Raiders. Those kids had 30 days to go in the transfer portal. Oh, what do you know? If you have the will and wherewithal, you can just pass go, collect $200, and then make it work with the calendar. Holy smokes, I'm shocked. If it's difficult for schools administratively, here's an idea. Throw a little money at it and put some more admins on the matter. There is no good reason. I'm sure someone has a reason. It's just not a good reason why the calendar is set up like this. Completely and utterly busted. I did want to close with Mike Norvell. So he's under a lot of fire because he doesn't recruit at the high school level the way he should. They were the worst Power 4 team in the country last year, and they're playing this week for the right to go to a bowl game. And after the Alabama win, expectations got inflated. I did not jump on that bandwagon. I said, well, from a ranking standpoint, they got to be up there because they just beat Alabama by 14 points. But I don't know. I feel like that team is not. I was right. I was very right on that. Sometimes I'm wrong. And I come on and tell you I'm very wrong. On that one, I was right. Everybody else jumped the gun on Florida State. I said, can I see a little bit more? We saw a little bit more. It got ugly real fast. So Norvell being retained, I don't think is being received incredibly well because last year was so bad and this year the second half has been really terrible. But can we look at this through one of the most important ways to evaluate a coach? Are you going forward or are you going backwards? So last year they went backwards in the biggest way imaginable, from 13-0 to 2-10. That is one of the sharpest declines in college football history. They are statistically the worst preseason top 10 AP poll team of all time. They're fighting to make a bowl game this year. If you see that as a restart point, because it was too expensive to fire him, and probably still is too expensive to fire him, how is going from 2 wins to 5 or maybe 6 not an improvement? What if Florida State wins that and wins a bowl game and goes 7-6? Isn't that the sort of progress you're looking for? Yeah, it was a historically bad year, but don't tell me Mike Norvell can't coach at all. He won the ACC 2 years ago. And yeah, it's going to take some work to get back to that level as a program, but it's not like it's Dabo Swinney living off a couple of national championships from before COVID. This is a guy that very recently has shown he can acquire talent in the portal. And sometimes he relies on it too heavily. Those discussions are all fair to have. But I was surprised at the reaction to all of this because it was mostly, why are they bringing him? Oh my gosh, you got to get rid of him. I'm going, wait a minute. So he had the worst moment of his coaching career, the 2024 season. It happened. What has he done? They're better. He reloaded with his staff. And no, they're not where they would like to be one day. Did you think they were going from 2-10 to 9-3? That was never reasonable. The Alabama win was maybe the worst thing that happened to Mike Norvell and the FSU Seminoles as they have undergone this rebuild because it set expectations out of whack. Kind of like Lincoln Riley's 2022 season at USC. Caleb Williams was so great, they overperformed. And then the expectation was set right there when in reality, they needed to do a lot of program building, which they finally are. Well, Florida State needs to do some program building. Now, I will continue to talk about, once the offseason rolls around, how their offseason plan goes and how their high school recruiting efforts pick up or don't pick up. But Florida State's a better team this year than they were last year. Isn't that what you were looking for? I found that to be strange. That's where I end today's show. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.